I'm Andrew Epstein for Pure Grain TV. So when I was in my late teens, I got wrapped up in what was called nu metal. And nu metal, much to the chagrin of purists, was a modern style of metal that eschewed some of the more elaborate solos in favor for hip-hop beats and a bit of a down tuning and a bit of a chugging kind of mentality. And it really pissed people off because they were all about the purity of the sound. But the thing is, bands like Korn and Slipknot, they actually managed to tap into this sort of this level of depression and angst represented by the 90s teenagers. And these bands went on to become superstars and even became so popular that they managed to integrate some pop music into their sound. So what started off as a pretty extreme noise actually turned into something that became sort of a household name, and kids began to find comfort in a lot of these groups. And not too many of them survived with the same kind of success that they began with, but Korn being one of them. And we've come to the Sound Academy today to speak to drummer Ray to find out what it's like being in one of the biggest, most popular antidepressant bands of all time. All right, I'm here at the Sound Academy in Toronto with Ray from Korn. How you doing today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm feeling pretty good. So, I mean, I've followed Korn for a really long time, since I was, in my late teens. And, I guess I want to start off by asking you, and I apologize if you've gotten variations of this question over time, but, when you first joined the band, did you feel like sort of like a Jason Newsted kind of situation? Because Korn is one of those bands where it's like, it has its own mythology to such a huge extent, and when I was a kid, I like music now, but when I was a kid, I was like, and you got to be so passionate about that kind of, because they talk about such deep subjects. So, what was that kind of feeling, overwhelming?
Yeah, it's weird. I was talking, a lot of people, even like Neil Peart is still the new drummer in Rush. And it's like he's been in for decades and decades. It's like, but when you're not the original guy, of course, and I get it, I'm a fan, I'm one of those guys that goes to 3 or 4 shows a week when we're home in LA, and I get bummed out. I say like, what do you mean Alice in Chains has a new singer? What do you mean Journey got this Filipino guy singing now? I get it, I'm a fan, but you know what? People got to accept the change, you know what I mean? They got to move on, but they, obviously if it wasn't for the 5 core original members, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So obviously it says something about it, but most of the people are really cool, and they've accepted, and they've welcomed me with open arms,
So having said that, you being a music fan and understanding, how people feel about that sort of dedicated thing, there's been a lot of, I don't know about a lot, but there's been, some shit talking from David, the former drummer. I mean, like, does that affect you? Are you one of those guys can detach from that kind of thing, or did it hurt a little bit?
No, it didn't hurt once. I heard about it. I didn't even read it. Some really close friends of mine told me about it, and it was, I don't have any time for the drummer, or I think it's kind of funny actually. So we're just so focused and dedicated to this record coming out, and for the last 6 years I've built such a strong bond with musically and as friends with the original members. Now that Head's back, now it's all 5 of us, just a freaking machine. So I really don't have time for all the drama. It's like they do it. And the funny thing about it is we're totally different drummers. People are always comparing us. We're so far. I've had a big career before Korn. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is your big gig." No, I've played with David Lee Roth for 8 years. No, you haven't lived until you played in David Lee Roth's band. I mean, that's a whole different animal to tackle. I mean, and then Jakey Lee wasn't the easiest guy to play with. And then Army of Anyone was one of my favorite bands ever. Robert and Dean DeLeo are such strong people. So I've already had an illustrious career. Korn is just like the pinnacle of, like, I'm so happy and grateful to be in this band and to make passionate, great music with these guys. That's awesome.
So, having said that, being a passionate drummer, being a guy who's played with some of the big guns throughout the years, so your first big release, one of the first biggest release you had with Korn album was the dubstep album, and so being a drummer and you got the guys, hey, we're gonna do a dubstep album, it sounds to me like being the drummer in that situation, that would kind of annoy you. That would kind of like take away from some of the ideas that you were trying to bring forth. Hey, I've got some great, here's this kid with the shaved sides of his head, he's going to do beats on the album. What did that make you feel like at the time?
Well, Korn 3, Remember Who You Are, was my first record with it, so that was completely opposite. I was like going back to the old studio roots, the one that, you know, so I did have a chance, and I actually, my first recording ever was Kidnapped to Santa Claus with them, which was like a complete, taking a classical song, making it a super heavy song. So I've had already a lot of experience writing with acoustic drums, but you know what, I love being in a band that's not afraid to take chances. You know, when John brought the Skrillex up to us, and he played us Get Up, the demo version, and I just remember going, wow, this is going to be an amazing side project. And he's like, no, I want this to be Korn. I'm like, what? Awesome. Like, I didn't even flinch at it. I mean, of course, I love the organic feel of drums, and like on the new record, it's awesome because we mix the old school heart of Korn with, and it's very 2013 sounding, you know. But I love the fact that it was a challenge for me, you know, for him to say like, hey man, you're not going to be doing crazy fills on this record. It's all about the giant beats, and I embraced it, you know. And live, it was so fun to play, you know. Now we're moving on to this, heads back in the band, and we got this whole new sound with the old Korn attitude mentality.
So I had a chance to check out your set from Rock am Ring from this year. It was fantastic. And what's really, this kind of throws me, not in a bad way, about the band, is that when I hear new songs like Never Never, being a teenage fan of Korn, former teenage fan of Korn, as in not a former fan, but a former teenager, you know, I'm like, wow, that's really sounds like a different band. And then hearing you guys play stuff from the first 3 records, and I'm like, more than ever, at least more than the last few years, I'm like, wow, they really sound like they did, you know, when those records came out. And so it seems like you guys, you really sound like the original Korn, but at the same time, you really sound like a completely different band. And I think it's really interesting because most bands, like when they have newer material, they sort of become a new band, which also, you know, covers some of these old songs. But I found that, you know, and Jonathan's looking lean and mean, and you guys, you know, it does harken, you know, that this old sound does seem to be preserved quite well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's. I mean, and this is the 20th year, and I mean, next year will be the 20th anniversary. You know, my 6th year. So to have guys that are this passionate about still going out and wanting the, you know, to have the drive, you know, to go out. And a lot of people, when you get, you know, around, we're not 22 anymore. You get around to get our age, it's like they just go out for a paycheck, or they go out for we're so into our families and the music now. That's all it's about. So now I think the fans know that, because the Paradigm Shift record was so not forced. You know, we just went in, took our time, wrote the right songs, picked the right ones, had Don Gilmore produce it beautifully, and we're so, you know, I think this is the best Korn record in the last 10 years. You know.
So, you know, back in the day, you know, when I was like first getting into the band, you know, they always used to talk about, you know, how John got picked on and stuff like that. And so when you joined the band, you know, was it kind of boys club? Do you still, like, you know, back to Jason Newsted, I always think they kind of gave him a hard time when he joined Metallica. So, I mean, like, how is this band? Seems like it's a band where it's a guys kind of band, and they would, you know, do a lot of sort of frat kind of stuff, like for a new guy. Was there any of that when you joined?
I'm not so much. Like they were asking me more about how it was like to work with David Lee Roth, because that was like the hazing upon hazings. I mean, that guy's, you know, he just has it's a whole book writing itself. But not so much. I mean, we're such family guys. You know, it's funny. Everyone's like, what's it like backstage? We open our Macs up when we Skype our kids and our wives, and it's like, there wasn't, the only hazing I had was we didn't really get to rehearse that much in the beginning. So I was freaking out, because I'm a huge fan of the Untitled record, because Terry Bozzio is probably one of my favorite drummers of all time. So I learned that entire record for the audition for Korn, you know, and we played 6 or 7 tunes off of that, and we never rehearsed before that tour. So we literally ran the set list at soundcheck, and then I played the first gig in Dublin, Ireland, with no rehearsal. So that was the worst hazing of all. Yeah.
I did want to actually ask, but I'll hold off on for 1 second. So like, so they always used to talk about, and I want to know, I guess this is like my one sort of dirt question, is that, you know, they used to give Jonathan a really hard time when I was a kid, and that's what they seemed, you know, they always seemed to pick on him. And now I look on stage, I'll go back to the Rock am Ring show, so he looks like lean and mean, you know, he looks like, and all the other guys, you know, they're all wearing like makeup and stuff, and like costumes and things like that. So, you know, it just seems like the worm sort of turned a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's such a strong personality. I mean, John, no one on the planet's like that guy. I've worked with a ton of musicians in my career, and the guy, let alone, you know, how deep he is, you know, vocally with his lyrical content, but just an overall person. The guy is so deep and out there in a great way. You know, he's just a beautiful human being. You know, like the guy's, I don't know, that he's definitely irreplaceable. You know what I mean? Like as far as the singer goes, if something, you know, as I say, like you could never replace John. I'm like, you're right, you could never replace that because he's such what he is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe let him know that now it's time for him to get his sort of comeuppance since they're all wearing the makeup and stuff now. But and I want to go back to David Lee Roth for a second because I'm a huge fan of Henry Rollins, and Henry Rollins always talks about the time he spent with David Lee Roth, and like David Lee Roth gets this kind of like party man kind of like reputation, but like you know, he also seems kind of like sage. You know, he kind of gives like did he ever give you sort of any good pieces of advice or tips or like what's the sort of the best one that pops into your head when we ask him that?
I like to, you know, use those like 8 years as like the school of Roth. I mean, literally, the guy is so intelligent. Like we'll be in Sweden riding on the bus, and he'll just go, you know, the population here is blah 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 blah, and they have this many this, and you're just like, how do you know all this stuff? You know, the guy just takes life and kind of squeezes it out. You know what I mean? Who becomes an EMT in New York City, has his own radio show, gets his helicopter license? I mean, the guy's just out of his mind. You know, and yet. He taught me a lot about the entertainment business. So first and foremost, that was like everything I learned. He's like, people are paying good money. I don't care if you're the drummer, guitar player, bass player, whatever, put on a show. So he's the reason a lot of my like showmanship. I hate when I go to a concert and I see a rock drummer back there like waiting for the bus look on his face. Like give me a show. I could have stayed home and listened to the CD. I want to entertain. So that always stuck with me about Dave. You know, he really taught me.
You know, he has this reputation, like I said, for being like sort of sage and being highly intelligent. You know, did the sort of the party atmosphere equal that? Did he still keep that going? You know, even though it was a bit later in the career, obviously. Like, did he equal those out, or was it again sort of quiet time on the bus most of the time?
It wasn't that bad. I mean, I was in from 97 to 05, and it wasn't. You know, nothing like it was back in the day. I hear Van Halen stories. I'm like, geez, how are you guys breathing right now? You know, but no, it wasn't that bad. It was fun. You know, I'll just leave it at that. It wasn't. there was nothing crazy or no debauchery. You know.
Well, it's the best education you could possibly get. So basically, you guys are gonna do like a big load of touring coming up now, and that's gonna be, you know, occupying you for a while. And it seems like Korn does, you know, multiple things at once. Is it gonna be purely on this album for the next little while?
Yeah, we're gonna be pushing this hard. I mean, the talk, our schedule's already full till the end of 14 right now. It's crazy. So we're and it's so awesome to add these new songs. We're playing 3 tonight, you know, at the show, and mixing the super old Korn songs with the new, with Brian back in the band. We have a whole new surge of energy and rejuvenation with this. And to the listeners and viewers out there, I highly encourage them to buy the deluxe edition because it has a DVD in it with the whole story of Brian getting back in and the reconciliation. So it's, you know.
Last question, and so I was talking about before how Korn is kind of, you know, it's still the same band, but it's also, you know, can be a very different band. And Korn kind of makes me feel, when I saw that performance at Rock am Ring and I heard, you know, some old songs, I'm like, wow, I feel really young. And then I see Never Never and I watch the video for that and I'm like, wow, I feel really old. And Korn, you know, it seems to be this band that can make me feel those ways simultaneously, and you've got all these really young bands, you know, opening up for you. And I remember in the 90s when the situation was just all new metal and stuff like that. And so, you know, how does that make you feel? You're a fan, like you said, from back then, you're in the band now. So, I mean, if it makes me feel both of those ways, how does it make you feel?
Well, it's you know, this band's crazy. I mean, we've had everyone from you know, Journey to Lamb of God to you name it. I mean, around the gamut. You know, we have Asking Alexandria. It's like, they're these, you know, they're between 22 and 24 years old, and they're just all this energy, and they're blowing up overseas, and it's crazy. I don't even know what you call their music. You know, some people call it screamo, some people call it, you know, grind metal. It's like there's names out there I haven't even heard of it before. To me, music is music. It's like if you're playing from the heart, and you know, and you're emotional about it. You know, but there's a lot of cookie cutter bands still. Like there's a lot of bands out there that sound too much like the other bands, you know what I mean? So that's one thing I love about Korn, is the uniqueness of it. You know, whether we put out Never Never as the first single, which sounds nothing like the rest of the songs on Paradigm Shift. So that really stirred up the pot because everyone's like, Brian's back in the band and they're releasing this song. But then we put all these Instagram teasers out that like hit people over the head and they're like, wait, this is what we were. So, But I like that whole thing. You know, I don't want to be typical. It's too easy to just say, oh, let's put on another Life is Peachy. We could have done that in our, you know what I mean? It's easy to go write a bunch of riffs and come back. So it's important to us to keep it current and fresh. So we believe in what we play on stage, because you have to believe in it yourself for it to transpire to the crowd and for them to believe in you. So.
Ray, I want to thank you so much for speaking to me today, and wish you the best of luck on this tour and the album, and I guess being very busy for the next year and a half. And do you have any final words today?
None, just thanks for your support, and thanks for all the fans for supporting all this time. Appreciate it.
Never, never, never. Never, never, never.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ray from Korn, and you're checking out Pure Grain TV.